Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. On this week's docket, America's finest city gets 4 title fights this weekend. One championship loses one of their goats. Chucky Olives is not too happy about his next business trip. All this and much, much more. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Gorgeous George, and with me, as always, some of the sharpest MMA minds in the biz. Joining me this week goes from MMA Junkie Radio, also the creator of SBC. Dan Tom, the host of the Protect Your Neck podcast. Check it out, especially before you're putting some coin on them fights. And Danny Segura, the host of Hablemos MMA on YouTube. Mis amigos que hablan español, les van a gustar mucho ese show. Kamikazes on the ones and twos. It's time to get started. Guys, this Saturday, Bellator offers up 4 title fights at their historic Bellator 300 show. The event takes place in San Diego, California, and it's pretty stacked from top to bottom. Ain't no way the champs hold on to all 4-0. Oh, sorry, that slipped out. Maybe it's because the Niners are 4-0. I meant to say all 4 straps, right? This is MMA, and the past few years have been really unpredictable. Panel, I want to know from your end, who is your lock to keep that belt? Hopefully I didn't jinx it with that word. And who is the fighter who has the toughest matchup and is in danger of having their reign end? We go to you for the first take this week.
Man, lock is a strong word, but if I got to use it, I'm going to go with Liz Carmouche. I feel like she's on a roll right now. She's getting it done, and she's getting the finishes in all these fights. She's such a tough competitor. Ilima Lei, for me, feels like maybe she's been having trouble finding an identity since she lost her title. She's up and down. I know they've trained together in the past. I feel like Liz is the one that's probably going to stand out here the most. If I have to pick somebody that's going to possibly do an upset, there's a few, but I'm going to pick one that I don't think anybody else is going to pick. I think Cat Ngannou, okay, hear me out. I think she's being taken lightly a little bit here. She's had a chip on her shoulder. She's a tricky fighter. She always gives you an honest camp, right? You never feel like she's coming into a fight out of shape or anything like that. I think she still has a few tricks up her sleeves. And when you look at her record overall, wins over Amanda Nunes, Miesha Tate, Raquel Pennington, like you can't do that as a bad fighter. So if you want Chris Cyborg, you want her off of a layoff. That's when she's getting her. Maybe that's just the right recipe where she could maybe pull something off, because a lot of these title fights, there's a few you can look at, but I don't know why. I just have this hunch, man. I think that maybe she might give her a better fight than we're all expecting.
That is one hell of a skin on the wall, man. She did beat Amanda Nunes when they were both in the UFC. So she's risen to the occasion on many times. I was there for the Miesha Tate fight, by the way, at the Mandalay Bay. Great fight as well. All right, so let me give the other guys a benefit that I didn't give go. Sorry about that, little brother. So let me give you some odds, too, just to give some context to the listeners. Ryan Bader, minus 190. Linton Vassell, plus 140. Chris Cyborg, minus 550. Cat Ngannou, plus 350. Usman Nurmagomedov, minus 1,600. Brett Primus, plus 700. And Liz Carmouche, minus 275. Ilima Lei McFarland, plus 200. All right, let's continue here the conversation. Who do you think has the best chance to hang on to the belt, and who is maybe more susceptible to not being and still? Dan Tom, it's on you.
I like Goz's answers with the ladies. The Carmouche and McFarland one scares me because it's training partners, and that's always a weird wrinkle, even though I don't think they got the side wrong as far as those betting odds that the gorgeous one just laid out for us. I don't think those are wrong per se. And, the thing about Ngannou that I will add to what Goz said is that a lot of these women like Carmouche, when they go over to Bellator, you really test their hunger. Whereas, UFC, it's just like if Rousey were to come back, for example, or some of these other big names, you question, are they doing it for that, that contract and that platform? Are there other ulterior motives, if that makes sense? I'm going to go with the odds-on favorite to probably keep it most, Usman Nurmagomedov, though I will say those odds that George just cited at minus 1,600 are kind of insane there. I'll talk about more of that in my breakdown, which you guys can see later this week at MMA Junkie. And my live dog is maybe not so much of a surprise now that George mentions the odds. I was actually surprised to see Linton Vassell getting so much credit. Of course, he is a man. He is 40 years of age, as John Anik would say. And so is Bader for that matter. Bader is 5-0 in rematches, whereas Vassell's undefeated in rematches too, although I believe he only has 2 to 3 to his name. But he is definitely the live dog I'm looking at this weekend.
Good stuff. And we'll be looking for your breakdowns, Dan, on MMA Junkie, like we always do. You always bring it. We go to Madrid, España, for Danny Segura's take on this topic one here.
Yeah, I agree with Dan. I think as far as a live underdog, I'm going to go with Vassell. He's actually looked amazing since losing to Ryan Bader. Like, he's gotten so much better. And yes, he's 40, but you could argue that maybe he's in his prime. This is the best he's ever looked. And at heavyweight, I do think that changes the dynamic. He can wrestle his ass off. So I don't know if Ryan Bader will have the ability to take him down and control him. So I think Linton Vassell has a very good shot at becoming champion here. And as far as my lock, I'm going to go against Ghost here and pick Chris Cyborg. I mean, she's one of the greatest of all time. It's hard to bet against her. And I know Kat Zingano's pretty good, and respect to her. But she is a 35er naturally. Yes, a strong 35er, but I think there's going to be a big size advantage from Chris Cyborg. And we know that Kat Zingano is always looking to wrestle, looking to grapple. And on that end, I think that'll play against her, the size difference. And Chris Cyborg is just Chris Cyborg. It's hard to bet against that woman. So I'm going to go with my lock with Cyborg here.
Danny and Goes, opposite ends. Do I hear or sense a mustache and hair bet, or what are we doing here?
I already have to
Hey,
grow.
hold on. George, you got a weird obsession with me getting rid of my mustache. Do you want to say something to me? Because you're always making bets on this program for me trying to get rid of it. Do you want to say something? Is there something you need to get off?
If anything, I wore the Atletico Madrid proudly, the scarf proudly when I lost my bet. So maybe I am trying to get you to lose one bet on the show because you're undefeated.
I feel like we feel like that's just your main weapon. You know, that you come in every week with that powerful mustache. So if we have to cut you down, we got to start there.
Yeah. Speaking of Goes, where's your mustache? I see Nolan King working on his. Where's yours?
Well, here's the deal. I'm Latino. I can have a mustache by tomorrow, 3 p.m. Nolan, on the other hand, it's going to take some time. So I'm more on his timetable. But I will sport a mustache here. I lost the bet. The dumbest bet. Who would have thought, man? A draw? Are you kidding me? You two guys should be the ones right now suffering.
Yeah. Well, I guess we have Mike Bell to thank for that. Most people weren't thanking Mike Bell, including Valentina Shevchenko. But yeah, we did get that out of these two guys, so I can't wait for them to pay off their bet. By the way, folks, if you want to be included in the show, you can. We have a chat to the side. This includes YouTube comments and Facebook comments, so check it out. Obviously, the smarter, the more productive the comment or question, the more likely it is for us to include it. Prince Vegata Son says, hi, is this live? It is live. Sky V's an El Daddy. He's always in there. He's El Padrino of the chat, it seems like. Prince says, I missed the UFC, so I had to settle for some bad boxing. I wouldn't call it that. I think Canelo was very sharp in his dismantling of Charlo. So I wouldn't call it bad. It wasn't Crawford Spence-esque. I'll grant you that. Ben Kenobi, chill out. He says, if you're not talking about Cedric Moumbe's legendary PFL entry at 9-second knockout, you're enemies of MMA. I mean, bro, the show started like when you posted that 4 minutes into the show. My intro takes a minute alone. Settle down. I hadn't mentioned Canelo up until now. It doesn't mean I'm an enemy of boxing. Holy cow. Anyway.
Doesn't Canelo, though, in a way, like I kind of understand that comment when he says bad boxing, because you have to pay for it. You know, like if something like that happens in the UFC, you're kind of like, well, all right, you know, we'll come back next week or even on a Dana White's Contender Series or something like that. You have to wait a long time in between big boxing matches. And when one kind of ends like that, and you have to dish out that much money for it, it does sting.
It does, yeah. I guess that is a good point in that regard. Maybe he should have specified. I don't know. I thought Canelo just looked pretty damn good. A lot of people have been calling for his decline. All right, Bullfrog Actual says Cyborg is going to smash Kat Zingano because she has heavy hands and great takedown defense. Hey, not a bad take. I like that one. All right, but look, I want to send something back to the guys here before we move on to the next topic. Guys, is this a case where the champs are just damn good and dominant, or is the promotion so top heavy that it just lacks depth for their champions to be tested? Because those were some big odds I was quoting earlier. Anyone want to take that, or all three of you please chime in?
I'll defend them. I think it's more the sampling. I think I often refer to it as Ronda Rousey odds. We see, despite how volatile the sport is proven, And even though I compare the women's division to heavyweights as far as the volatility, not because they can one shot knock out each other, but because of the odds. You go and play, blind bet women's underdogs in MMA, you might not do too bad. I know, George, we've talked about that spamming underdogs, angles. That's maybe one angle where you could actually maybe do it, especially with the odds on return. And then with Usman Nurmagomedov, even though I'll probably pick him, even though he is the rightful favorite, those odds are also inflated because, we see, I don't know, with like Cedric Doumbé is borrowing from the Islam Makhachev fan crowd, but we see how passionate a lot of those Eastern European, and, if you've got an OV on the next to your name, you're treated often as the next coming, whether it's a pundit or a gambler. So I think a lot of those are baked into the prices. I think Bellator, in their defense, has done a good job as far as the competition, bringing new faces, cultivating their own, and so forth.
Yeah. And honestly, to be fair, it's part of their Grand Prix, which is kind of cool that the champ defends along the way. So if you think about it, from 1 facing 8 to then the winner of 4 and 5, I guess maybe you are going to get this sort of a disparity because they may not be necessarily facing the top guy. All right, let's move on to topic 2. You guys can always bring it back if you want. This is still a Bellator topic because, look, let's not play dumb here. We've all heard the rumors. Bellator MMA might not be around much longer, though President Scott Coker has stated the planning has already begun for Bellator 301, which, when he said it, we weren't aware of the title fights coming up at Bellator 301 in Chicago. Solid card, love it. And Bellator 302, which now leads us into 2024. Now, I don't know if that means much because we're not saying they're just pulling the plug. At least we don't think so. I don't know. But, guys, how did we get here? And if the rumors are true, what's the best scenario for the promotion and its talent? Dan Tom, take it away.
I mean, the best scenario for the promotion is to finally find a home. I mean, say what you will about the name and say what you will about Bellator and this being an excuse to get rid of that name. No one likes that name. But the real problem really hasn't been their name. It's really been just being able to showcase that talent, even when these sales talks weren't going on. So now that they are, without maybe a strong front runner for a home or anything like that I could think of, if you guys could, it almost makes me want to channel the selfish fan in me, where I almost want to see the absorption happen from whoever they're getting bought out by, so we can see some awesome matchups made. But I'm a big fan of Coker's, kind of run machine there, going back to the Strikeforce days, bias included here, guys, but he brought back, MMA to Hawaii from the Elite XC days and, and whatnot. And so that was really cool to see and to cover those Bellator Hawaii shows. So also selfishly, I kind of want them to stay intact. So I'm very torn here. I'm going to sit back. I'm going to wait and see. I'm going to keep my expectations low.
Man, that was epic that they went to Hawaii. Why the UFC was never able to pull that off, and they're so committed to still not doing it, is beyond me. I saw some regional shows in Hawaii. It is nuts, man. It really, really is. Those are some great crowds that the same type of love Mexico gets, Brazil gets, Ireland gets, France gets. The Hawaiians would definitely get as well. All right, Danny, how about you, man? What's the best scenario for the promotion and its talent?
Well, I mean, I guess to stick around, but it doesn't seem like that's gonna be possible. But if Viacom and Showtime have a change of mind, then I guess that'd be great for MMA to have more options around, to have Bellator on, because I do think, like Dan mentioned, they've done some great things, not only in Hawaii, but like people forget they were the first major promotion to take an event to France once they legalized MMA. They've done great things over in Ireland as far as like cultivating talent there and bringing great shows there. And even the Grand Prix, like you see all these little things that they're doing that are very unique to the promotion that PFL or the UFC doesn't do, and they have great talent. So I'm a fan of Bellator. As far as like how did we get here, I think it's a combination of a bunch of things. I think they did a lot of great things, but it's just hard to compete against the UFC. It's hard to be in this industry. Like I don't know why investors would want to go into this industry given the current circumstances, given the current landscape. The UFC just has conditioned people to just watch the UFC. And if you want to watch anything else, it's like getting out of your way, getting out of the road. And at this point, like being a combat sports fan is very expensive. I don't think it helped that Bellator went behind a paywall with Showtime. I think a lot of people have their hands full already just trying to keep up with the ESPN fees that keep increasing apparently every year, not only ESPN Plus, but the actual pay-per-views as well. So I think it's mainly that, because they did have good talent. They did have great fights. But being behind a paywall, it's going to get a lot to get people to tune in. So I think the paywall, the visibility, I think the name, I think they could have used the rebranding when Scott Coker took over, but I guess that's too late now. And then overall, it's just hard to make it in MMA, right? It's just very difficult. The UFC has a good grip of the market, and it's going to take a lot to pay your way and start making money in this industry as an MMA promotion.
Solid takes, my friend. All right, how about you guys? Finish up here.
I think Danny makes some good points there. Like it's a rough spot because, for these organizations outside of the UFC, they're fighting for our time, right? The UFC owns Saturday. During the week, you'll get a Dana White's Contender Series or an Ultimate Fighter. And if you're a football fan, well, that's Monday and Thursday, right? That's covered. So they are really fighting to get our time. That's why if you make a card like this, that's exactly what you need, right? You need to get people's attention. However, where things kind of go south for them is all of this being up in the air, not knowing what's going to happen with Bellator, where they're going. Are they going to merge with PFL? Is it just the end? It kind of hurts a little bit, the title fights and the value of that belt. When you don't know if that belt's even going to stick around or what's going to happen to it, the interest in those title fights kind of drop a little bit. Now, a fight is a fight. At the end of the day, you want to sit there and you want to tune in because there's two good fighters involved in all four of them. But not really knowing the future, I think, is kind of hurting them a little bit right now. And it kind of diminishes the value of what it is they're trying to accomplish here, which are 4 title fights. We should be jumping out of our seats. However, not knowing in which direction they're going to go kind of hurts it a little bit.
Good stuff, guys. And I wanted to follow up, since the strongest rumor is them being aligned with PFL somehow, whether they get bought out or just run under the same umbrella, who knows? But are there any matchups you guys have thought about, like, or just a storyline that seems attractive to you if they do go the route of Bellator, who, by the way, had a great presence on ESPN this year and ESPN Plus? But anything jump out to you guys?
I think there's a lot of things that can kind of happen here. Like, honestly, Chris Cyborg and Kayla Harrison, right? I mean, how long have people talked about that? What's going to happen with the relationship with Ryzen that Bellator's had? That's been kind of actually pretty cool to see some fighters go that way, other fighters come the other way. Is that going to continue with PFL? So there's a lot of interesting stuff there.
Yeah,
I think
that was a good one. I like that one. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah. I think individually, like you can get lost daydreaming about all these potential fights that you can get, mainly against UFC talent, because that's the at least perceived wise, it's the best, right? So I think there's a lot of matchups that people are intrigued by. But ideally, what I'd like to see is an acquisition from PFL. I think the merger of both rosters would be quite something. It would be kind of like WC or Strikeforce, where, it'll be a very, very strong number 2. And there's no doubt that that's number 2. I mean, right now, number 2 is between PFL and Bellator anyway. So if they merge, I mean, that's a no-brainer. But I think given how the UFC is operating now, that they have so many fight night cards, and a lot of them, let's be honest, they're not great. The pay-per-views are amazing. And then you get some fight nights here and there that are quality, but there's also a lot in between that are not. And I think if you acquire the Bellator roster and then you add it to PFLs and then you kind of schedule, smartly around the calendar year, you can find yourself in multiple events where you go to head-to-head with the UFC and you have the better card. And then being on ESPN Plus, which is not a free platform, but you're already getting paid for it you're already paying for it for UFC. I think you can start seeing some competition in between promotions.
Yeah, that would be the advantage of the ESPN family. How about you, Dan? Anything you can think of here to add to the guys, or yourself?
I'll just add that. I'll be curious to see what kind of shakeup it does. Does it also make PFL already seems to be doing their Europe thing, so maybe they have their own Europe expansion like Bellator did. Maybe not as Ireland heavy, but they have their own. I will say, did they bring back their middleweight division since cutting it after my man Luis put the guns down? Taylor got the championship. One of the best $1 million moments, their early ones with Luis Taylor. They cut the division, but one of the big guys from Bellator has everybody's attention is Johnny Eblen, is why I mentioned that. So, do they open the middleweight division for that, or with that shakeup, does that kind of open the door for Eblen perhaps to test the waters while he is still arguably even still pre-prime in his career to go into that UFC market, right?
No,
Yeah.
I was exactly going to bring that up. Was the middleweight division was done away with because they decided to go with feather, light, welter, light heavyweight and heavyweight, but then they had the women's lightweight, which is now the featherweight. And yeah, they did away with the middleweight. And Johnny Evelyn would be a great guy to bring back and restore that division. I don't know if Mousasi has mileage left. That's brand name recognition there. And then anybody from PFL that wants to return back to middleweight, like Shootface, for example, or someone at welterweight that wants to test them skills higher, or a coveted free agent. Next thing you know, you have yourself a division. And then I also want to give some love to Larissa Pacheco. As much as Harrison versus Cyborg would be nice, Pacheco against, well, we know against Harrison's been pretty epic, but against her fellow Brazilian Cyborg, that interests me as well because she's become a gangster herself, man, in women's MMA. So I'm a big fan of her, covering her, and I think she's a gangster over there. And then Francis Ngannou obviously would have a few more options, I guess, starting with the winner of Bader and Vassell. Along with
I gotta interrupt you there, George, because there will not be a winner in that fight. It appears that Linton Vassell is out of his fight.
Oh, did that just happen?
Just broke it right now on MMA Junkie, thanks to Nolan King.
Okay. So I guess Bellator rolls with 3 fights, or have you heard if there's a replacement? I mean, it's this Saturday. We might be a little late on that one, right?
Yeah, the title fight, that might be a little rough, but it's unfortunate because I really do feel like Linton Vassell was a good challenge. Like when he's on top of his game, he's a tough out. Yeah. There are times where he just doesn't show up and it doesn't seem that way, but lately it seems like he's been able to put everything together, and that was a fight I was looking forward to. It sucks that we don't get to see that.
Yeah.
I'm looking at poor Dan, man. He's already probably looked at hours of video breaking this thing down, and it may have just gone out the window. But they'll run it back again. This is they're running it back here as heavyweights. They fought before as light heavyweight, but I guess this stuff happens in MMA. Disappointing for sure, though. I'm sure the promotion wanted to roll with the 4 title fights, and they still might. To be fair, keep it locked on MMA Junkie throughout the week, because this is how you find this type of information out. And this is also a good time, folks. If I may plead with you, if you like the content, look, it's free. We deliver it every Monday. It's live. Not just this, but everything attached to all the big shows, pre and post, right? Give us a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel. I guarantee you will not regret it. Quality content headed your way all the time. And it's the panel that moves around. So you'll hear from all the reporters, all the editors. And I think we do an outstanding job. So hey, take the time to hit the like and subscribe. It really, really means a lot to us. All right. So the only other thing I wanted to add was, I guess, look, there's 2 sides. When the UFC was number 2, the Pride's number 1. And you can argue that all day. Maybe it's the other way. I don't know. It pushed both organizations to the point where the UFC had this hunger to be number 1, and they became number 1. They haven't looked back. So we do love the competition. But I'm not going to lie. When the UFC absorbed all the WECs and then had the lower weights, when they brought Strikeforce over and Pride over, oh my God, as a fan, how could you not love those matchups? So I think both scenarios are awesome. We've seen both of them if you've been in the sport long enough. But like Go said, just decide on something already. Let's get this ball rolling. All right, let's continue here. A new champion was crowned in the one championship atomweight division as Stamp Fairtex defeated Seo Hee-ham via 3rd round TKO. Beautiful body punch. Congrats to Stamp Fairtex, who now holds 3 belts at one championship, including kickboxing and Muay Thai, excuse me. Very, very impressive. The title was vacant as previous champion Angela Lee retired from competition earlier in the night. Let's turn to that right now and watch Lee exit the sport.
I'm here today to officially announce my retirement. It has been an incredible 8 years, and I just want to say thank you to the fans. to One Championship, to Chatri, to my teams, and just everyone. There have been so many battles in and out of the cage. The last thing I want to say is this, to the fighters and to everyone out there watching right now, is that the greatest battle we will ever face won't be with an opponent standing in front of us. The greatest battle will be within ourselves. We all go through struggles, but we all fight. And each day, we are victorious when we choose to rise up in the face of adversity. So thank you guys so much. I love you. Thank you.
Wow, I watched that video a few times now, man. It's powerful. Let the guys unpack it because there's origins to what she's saying. But we wish her the best in her retirement. One hell of a champion for one championship, one of their pillars that helped grow that organization. Danny, the first take goes to you here. Unpack this. She retired at age 27, accomplished a lot, but her retirement speech kind of had two parts to it. So please go ahead.
Yeah, it's surprising, and at the same time, it's not surprising because, as you mentioned, she is 27. She is one of the bigger names at One Championship. She is beloved by the fan base there. It just seems she's got a lot left to accomplish if she chooses to continue on fighting, right? And that's not to say that she hasn't accomplished anything. I mean, she's been champion for a while, defended the belt, I think, like 5 times, even in 2 different occasions, went up a weight class to try to become One Championship champ, which is that's a lot for a 27-year-old. Usually 27-year-olds are just getting, to the title fights. They are just knocking at the door of the title. So congrats. She's achieved a ton. And at the same time, when I say it's not surprising, well, we know that she recently opened up about her mental health struggles. And I remember reading all the details of it and just thinking, oof, I don't know how comfortable I feel her continuing a fighting career where, these people are taking hits to the head and taking on brain trauma. And we know that just makes issues worse. So many fighters post their careers have opened up about depression, bipolar, this and that. And a lot of that is due to trauma. So I think she's making the best decision for her health. And ultimately, that is the best decision you can ever make. There's a great quote, and I forget who made it, but it says health is not everything, but without health, everything is nothing. And that includes mental health. So I'm glad that she's making this decision. It's a very courageous decision. And you never know. She is 27. Maybe things change down the line. But yeah, congrats on an amazing career.
Beautifully put, my friend. All right, how about you, Goes? What do you think of everything that transpired there over at One Championship over the weekend?
Well, she's going to be missed for sure. Her presence in mixed martial arts, especially in Asia, is just enormous. But Danny's right. When it comes to your mental health, there are no but this, but that. Like you have to take that first and foremost and make your decisions based off of that. This is a very dangerous sport. And you can't mess around if you're suffering like that. You have to attend to those thoughts and figure all that out. So I'm glad that she went the route of retiring. And like Danny said, she's still young. Maybe she could come back. But I enjoyed her time in the sport. She was a fighter that always came in shape. She gave an honest camp, and she always improved in every fight. And when you think about like her legacy and what she's been able to accomplish out there, like think about how many young females in Asia decided to maybe become mixed martial artists because of her. She's massive out there. She comes from a family, like we see this a lot in boxing, where you have families of boxers that from the moment, when all of us are out there hitting the T-ball and all that, they're in the gym and they're not just training martial arts, they're training to become fighters. And she kind of had that upbringing, and that's very rare in mixed martial arts, unless your last name is Gracie, right? So for her to be doing this as long as she's done it at that high level, it's a difficult thing on your mind, on your soul, on your body. So hopefully she'll be able to look at all the things that she's been able to accomplish, even fighting as a mother. That's so difficult. She's such a good role model for so many people. And if we do see her back, great. And if we don't, I think we can fall back and say, hey, this girl had a tremendous career and left a big footprint on that sport.
Yeah, good stuff goes. And you know, she did used to say she used to take a mother role too with the siblings, and I imagine not just her own child, but the loss of Victoria Lee still weighing
Mhm.
on the family, and it's something that I think will take time to heal. Now, at age 27, I'm also reminded of, and I want to respect her decision and her retirement, but this is a show where we get to speak about what we've experienced in life ourselves, apply it to the sport, or what we've seen in the sport ourselves. And Misha Tate went away for about 4 years and then came back. So she does have time on her side in that regard. If she calls it quits, it's been a brilliant career. But anyway, Dan, let's hear your takes on what transpired this weekend. Angela Lee retiring from mixed martial arts.
I mean, yeah, I just give her empathy as a human being, you know, regardless of a fighter. You don't need to take a shot to the head to have depression, have trauma, or have those traumas or depressions or episodes or whatever exacerbated. And yeah, man, that's a lot to deal with, especially when you have, you know, a family history with, you know, Victoria. And, you know, 27 is young, like Danny said, but then also, you know, you date back, she was kind of like the Tito Ortiz for the promotion. I mean, technically a teenager even when she did some of her headlining and some of her big spots, right? 2016, 7 years ago ish, like kind of on that cusp. But you look at, you know, how they were maybe trying to push, you know, kind of Victoria. She was even younger, kind of going through that, and that's a lot, even just for anybody, right? So I just give my empathy, you know, my sympathies as a human being to her and her family. The pressure young athletes, the pressure in small communities like Hawaii, where kind of everybody knows each other, you know, before it was like public or rumored. Like, you know, I feel like my family members who don't follow MMA knew more about this situation than people who follow cover the sport for a living, because, you know, it's one of those communities which only makes that kind of pressure, you know, it can make it worse for all the positives having a small, tight community can have. But as far as her career goes, I just suggest people go back and watch her series with like Mei Yamauchi or Zhang Jingnan. And when I finally do my, which is much needed to be redone, the top 5 women's fights in MMA, do not be surprised to see something from those series in there. So well worth watching as far as the MMA goes.
Mm-hmm. Dan, I'm going to turn right back to you because of those fights you brought up. My follow-up question to you guys is, one championship, obviously, any Hall of Fame they have or have, because I'm not even sure if they have one, to be honest. I don't think so, but they'll establish one at some point. We know she's a lock to get in there. But if the UFC becomes kind of the Hall of Fame that encompasses everything that's ever happened in MMA, for example, Bas Rutten or Kazushi Sakuraba, who didn't have long UFC careers, but what they accomplished was so grand, the UFC included them there. So would Angela Lee, guys, in your opinion, be a Hall of Famer? Dan, you know that because of your studies, there's some title defenses there. We counted them before the show, 5 altogether. She came up short in her trilogy match. That's fine. So did Matt Hughes against GSP, and he's in the UFC Hall of Fame. Her rivalry, which was the straw weight, meaning atom weight for them because of the hydration difference, with Mei Yamaguchi, was successful for her. Lots of positives overall, 11-3. What are your thoughts? Would she be in a UFC Hall of Fame if they kind of had those doors open to others that practice martial arts outside the UFC?
I'd say for a general Hall of Fame, it's tough. Even she's still kind of young in her career. To your previous point, George, I think there's time where she can make the case. So even if your answer is like mine, I don't think it should be a hard no, right? We don't know if she's going to come back or whatnot. But if it was a UFC centric one, I think it's even harder because the UFC doesn't have atom weight. You know, say what you will about fighters getting Hall of Fames for fights or non-championships getting, you know, Hall of Fames in certain wings. You still need certain wings, right? And it's hard to see the UFC opening an atom weight wing when they never had it. And then you have the complexity of the way one does its systems. It's not just like Shuto, where every time I classify the weight classes and I give these histories in my top 5, I always got to make like a separate category. Like, well, Shuto does it a little different. They actually go here, you know, their middleweight is actually what we know as welterweight, for example, right? Whereas ones also has a bit of a different meaning, but not because of a direct classification because of Shudo, but like what George said, because of a weird technicality that is their hydration system. So that puts a whole nother monkey wrench in it. Again, she's like the Tito Ortiz of one championship's microcosm history. She's very important there. But for an overall MMA Hall of Fame or UFC Hall of Fame, I would probably vote no.
Okay. How about you, Danny?
Yeah, tough one to answer. And I kind of hate these questions, not the question itself, but just the fact that there is no independent Hall of Fame where there's a simple criteria where we can go, okay, like this fighter could be, this fighter should be, et cetera, et cetera. The UFC's is even kind of all over the place. So I would guess that if we're going to do technically speaking wise, given that Donald Cerrone's in it, if we're talking about that kind of level of fighter, I mean, Angela Lee has done far more as far as, she became a champion and whatnot. Now you can debate, well, is the same level that you find at one championship the one that you find in the UFC? Well, we don't know because there's not cross-promotion fights. So it's very, very hard to say. I lean towards no, but I mean, who knows? Who knows? If she would have been in the UFC, who knows how far she would have gone, fighting under that promotion and against that type of talent.
Mm-hmm. Let me address this question real fast in the chat, and then we'll get to Goes. He can maybe chime in on this Hall of Fame discussion for Angela Lee. Crisco Wild in the chat says the idea of a fighter who was never in the UFC going to be included in the UFC Hall of Fame is silly. I'm not going to disagree with you, right? But see, me as someone who's covered the sport pretty much, or watched it since UFC 1, covered it for the last 17 years, I guess. I just think it's a damn shame that a guy like Fedor Emelianenko, or possibly a fighter like Angela Lee, that'll be decided by others, not me, or maybe even Patricio Pitbull. Like, maybe one day he's in the Bellator Hall of Fame. I don't think I've heard of them having one, but they may just go away all of a sudden too, and that Hall of Fame will be nothing. Right now, let's focus on what's real, and the UFC Hall of Fame seems to be it. I know there's some other independent MMA Hall of Fames out there. They just don't have the prestige that the UFC's Hall of Fame does. And if they do one day, great. But for now, they don't. And I guess that's why I bring it up, Crisco, because there are really some great athletes out there that have done well in our sport. And I think they deserve some sort of recognition. Now, I don't know, it'll have to be a separate wing or what. I brought up Kazushi because I think he only had 2 fights in the UFC. And Boss, I think, had 2 fights in the UFC. So it's not like you need a long, distinguished career. A lot of the recognition came from what they had done prior to coming to the UFC. So the UFC kind of has already dipped their toe, maybe not completely crossed over the line, and that's why it's brought up. But anyway, I guess that's me in defense of my question. Go ahead, Goes.
I'm gonna have to lean with the other 2 guys here on this one. If you're talking about footprint in mixed martial arts, she has a massive footprint. But if you want to break down fight per fight, when you're outside the UFC, your credentials just have to be phenomenal. And that's just not the case here. She could be on her way. You never know. If she comes back and accomplishes a couple more things, maybe you can have that discussion. But if we're calling it a career right now at this moment, I'd say she'd be on the outside.
All right, guys. I guess I would put her in, but you guys made up some interesting points. And look, the career's not done yet. It's done for now. Or I shouldn't say that. I don't think so. I think she's young enough where she can make a return. But first things first, like she said, the biggest fights are really not in the ring or in the cage. And we wish her strength and courage going forward in that regard. But what she's done has really been pretty phenomenal, in my opinion. Folks, let's continue here. Hit that like and subscribe, though. I'm going to give you some of those reminders throughout the show. And also, for those of you that are tuning in for the Dana White Contender Series weigh-ins, they will start on a separate stream just as we're ending the show. So calm down. You'll get to see both. And that's why we've been going an hour early, and we'll go back to our regular scheduled time, which is noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, in a few weeks here. But for now, we're coming in a little early, and hopefully some of you picked up on that by now. All right, next one. Former UFC heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou had an open workout this past week in Las Vegas. He's scheduled to compete in a boxing match later this month versus boxing heavyweight champion Tyson Fury. Now, here are some comments from John Fury, who is the father of Tyson Fury, and then I want the guys to chime in on that video. He says, just seen Francis Ngannou and Mike Tyson and that so-called trainer that's got the pads on. So that's Dewey Cooper, respected coach and former fighter. He says, seen the open workout. I hope he's kidding along and he's playing possum here. I hope that's a joke and intended to be a laugh, because if it's not, he ain't got a prayer. He ain't got a cat in hell's chance. He won't get out of the first round. It's probably going to be Tyson's quickest knockout. But you know what? It's going to be kidology that. It's got to be full-on games, because if that's what he's got, well, God help him, he'll get smashed to bits. That's all I'm saying, mate. That's embarrassing. If that's what he can do on a public workout, don't bother doing a public workout. It's a disgrace. He did not hold back, guys. That's for sure. All right, what did you guys think of the open workout? And did you pick up anything that adds to your analysis of the fight, pro or con? Goes, you're first.
I mean, open workouts are for show, right? The mechanics of hitting pads as a boxer, throwing from different boxing stances, using your footwork, it's all different, right? And you don't learn that in months. You look at a guy like Canelo Alvarez and what he did this weekend. This is a guy that's been doing this since probably he was able to walk. There's a big difference. And if you're Francis Ngannou, I don't know that you're trying to do all that stuff. Like, if you're him, I feel like you have one shot, and your one shot is to embrace who you are. You're a terrifying striker and you're an unpredictable boxer, right? I think you should embellish that. I think you need to really work on, don't try and be a boxer. It's not going to help you out. Go to the body, pound the body, and when you can, unleash hell to the head. Watch your cardio, manage your cardio, because it's way different in boxing. All this stuff in open workouts, hitting pads and all that, that's just for show, guys. It's nothing that's going to really be applicable to the fight. I really hope, I hope Fury's comments are kind of true, in the sense that hopefully he is playing a little possum, because none of that's going to help him in this fight. What's going to help him is him embracing who he is. And that's a terrifying striker coming from mixed martial arts, throwing from odd angles, having odd movement. I think that's the only thing that can maybe throw off a guy like Tyson Fury, who's been doing this his whole damn life.
Good stuff, Goes. I'm not laughing at you. I swear to God, I'm holding back. Dan and Goes, you might remember this. You guys remember Pride 33, I think, when Takanori Gomi did the open workout at Caesar's Palace? It was the most awful open workout of all time. I can only imagine what John Fury would think of him. He's putting a lot of stock into it, but look,
dude,
press is press. But that workout, I swear to God, was the most disappointing workout. And look, at that time, Takanori Gomi was it, if you guys remember, as a lightweight. So I'm sitting there going, woo, here he comes. Let's see what he can do. And it was a letdown.
But I remember this because I might be able to find it. I recorded it. We came all the way from California, and we were so excited for this. And this fool came out and hit pads for about 1 minute and 30 seconds, I think, is what it lasted. He barely did anything. But what did make up for it, George, I don't know if you remember, is right after him, the Shoot Box team came out. And boy, was that an impressive team, man.
Yeah. All right. Next up here is Dan Tom, the workout. Dan, your thoughts on it? Did you pick up anything, again, pro or con, that would add to your analysis of this upcoming boxing match?
I just want to shout out Pride 33 Shogun's post-fight interview. I love America. But yeah, I feel like Ngannou probably would have maybe done himself better just saying that than the open workout. Obviously, you can't take too much from the open workouts. I agree with a lot of Goes' analysis there, to be honest. That's honestly a lot of the analysis you'd get from me on this topic. Obviously, I'm a big fan of Ngannou, and I've got ties to his camp, so I'm very happy with him getting the bag. But seeing him, just try to play even more of Tyson's game than he's already going to have to play by stepping in the Queensberry rules there. I want to see him get the bag. I don't want to see him look like the bag, if you know what I mean. So yeah, not too impressive, but what are you going to do? It's open workouts.
Exactly. And I'm not going to say I didn't laugh at John Fury's rant, but Danny, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the workout itself wasn't good. He could be playing possum. You don't know that. But I remember, for example, like watching Chuck Liddell when he was going to fight Tito Ortiz the third time, doing an open workout and just looking at him being like, man, he looks awful. And then he actually didn't look great. He looked awful against Tito Ortiz. I remember also when I covered Vitor Belfort versus Evander Holyfield. Yes, that fight did happen. And I remember Evander hitting pads, and I'm like, oh, this is not going to be good. And, exactly what I saw was what transpired in the fight. So I don't know if he's playing possum or not. I don't want to put like too much stock in that open workout. But if that indeed is what we're going to get from Francis Ngannou, man, you just got to say it. He's got no pop in boxing. And that's not to say he doesn't hit hard, but there is such thing as pop doesn't necessarily mean power, because there's flyweights and very small fighters that can have pop. But like if you just see his strikes, they just kind of seem very under the water. Like he's not really yet comfortable with the mechanics. And even Mike Tyson, when he was showing him, Mike Tyson, who's a lot older, he's in his 50s, he seemed to be having more pop than Francis Ngannou. And again, I have all the respect in the world for Dewey Cooper and everybody in that camp, and Eric Nixick, and also Francis Ngannou. I mean, great MMA fighter, champion of the UFC. And again, what he's done outside of the cage has been awesome as well. But looking at him in the workouts, I was thinking kind of the same thing. Maybe not to the extent of a John Fury, but I was like, I hope there's more than this, because if that's what he's going to look like against Tyson Fury, it's going to be a rough night. Very rough night.
Here's a good question from the end, from the comments. Crisco Wild says, does Francis need to win in order to win? Or does he need to have the same kind of win condition that Logan Paul did versus Floyd Mayweather? Just make it to the end. I know what he means. It's kind of like a feel-good win, not necessarily the actual W that goes in your box rec. Anybody want to comment on that?
I think that's actually a pretty good point, because you have to think about what's on the line here. He's not going to retire off of this. He has to go back into mixed martial arts. And when you go back into mixed martial arts, you're carrying that title of being the baddest man on the planet. And if you just got knocked out, it's really tough to put that title on your back. But if you can go all rounds with one of the greatest heavyweights of all time in boxing, I think you kind of have a leg to stand on. I think it helps him a little bit more transitioning back into mixed martial arts.
Guys, would this be a bigger upset if Francis Ngannou can defeat Tyson Fury than when Francis Ngannou's coach, Mike Tyson, was upset by Buster Douglas? That fight was in 1990. So what's that? 33 years ago. Holy cow. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was pretty massive, but that was two boxers, and this is an MMA fighter against the boxer. I almost feel like I'm stealing your guys' lines. I'm sorry. Who wants to go first here? Danny, that's a half raise. Oh, he was actually wiping his eye. Dan, Tom, you go first.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't blame anybody for saying that it would be bigger if you want to, go, Dana White power slap with some numbers here, with the social media that wasn't around in 1990. I think my first boxing, I don't know if Meldrick Taylor, Julio Cesar Chavez was at 91. I don't know.
Right.
I don't remember back that far to 1990, although I was, young enough to remember that Tyson era, and what he brought, I believe, even without the internet, was bigger than what Tyson Fury kind of brings today. And you could argue that the oversaturation in technology could work against it being a bigger thing, right? Because there's going to be some other big news or some other big upset that happens not long, and it'll make us kind of forget about that. And you even look at Tyson still today, not just in the corner for this fight, but he's still kind of a cultural icon. He's in movies. So I'll say that Buster Douglas Tyson's going to be tough to beat. I think that's going to be the gold standard for a minute.
Good stuff. All right, Danny, we'll go back to you. I'm just joking. You know that, right? But if this was a car auction, you would have walked out with the car, because as the auctioneer, I would have said sold to that guy.
Okay. Good to know. Well, that fight was in 1990. I was born in 1992, so I wasn't even alive yet. So if we're talking media-wise, I wasn't around to witness what it meant, what people were talking about it. How many times was it on the news? For how long was it talked about? If we're talking about like an impact culturally and sports wise, like Dan Tom said, nowadays with social media, like things can just be so much bigger, but at the same time, they can get forgotten a lot quicker. So I would say maybe not, because Tyson I feel like is far of a bigger cultural icon than Francis Ngannou or Tyson Fury. Even though, again, I wasn't alive back then, but I will say, at least on a technical perspective, Buster Douglas was a boxer, had a bunch of fights under his name when he fought Tyson. I believe he had over 30 fights. Francis Ngannou, in this case, is not only does he not have any fights, this will be his boxing debut, but he doesn't have much experience boxing. All of it is under the rules of mixed martial arts, and he's going up against Tyson Fury, who is, arguably the best boxer right now. We'll see once he faces Usyk who the best one is. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of like two sides of the coin, right? Are we talking about media-wise or sporting-wise? Or sporting-wise? If it's sporting-wise, yes, this has to be a bigger upset just because Francis Ngannou has no experience under boxing.
Good stuff. All right, goes.
We got to think about gambling-wise, too, as 1 foot out the door in the chat says, he says, I believe Buster Douglas was 28-1 underdog. Look, in my opinion, I don't think Fury winning this fight wouldn't be as big because when Tyson lost that fight, he was at the top of his game. He was feared by everyone. People were barely making it out of the first round with this guy, right? He was manhandling top flight boxers, okay? When they chose James Buster Douglas, they had already kind of gone over the hill of them, the really good boxers, and now they're just looking for bodies to put in there against him. I think Buster had lost like four fights already going into that fight. So it was very surprising. The fact that he outboxed Mike Tyson was ludicrous. I couldn't believe that he was even able to do that. So where I will maybe flip-flop, if Francis Ngannou comes out here and outboxes Tyson Fury to a win, yes, it would be absolutely bigger. But if he knocked him out, look, this is a guy with very, very heavy hands who has nearly decapitated people in mixed martial arts. It would be surprising, but I don't know that it would be absolutely shocking.
All right, love it. And good stuff from 1 foot out the door on those odds. I believe he is right. Who is that, by? Is that Stipe Miocic or Scott Coker? Who is 1 foot out? I don't know. All right, we got to move on. We'll speculate later. Charles Oliveira isn't too jazzed about traveling to Abu Dhabi to face Islam Makhachev in a rematch of last year's fight. The two lightweights are scheduled to run it back on October 21st at UFC 294. With the UFC going to Sao Paulo weeks later, Oliveira was hoping for some hometown cooking when it came to the matchmaking. However, that is a fight night, to be fair. He says, he told my MMA News, I don't necessarily think it's fair, but it's the game. That's where the champion is. He calls the shots, but I'm coming back for my belt wherever that is. With 12 years in the game, I just kind of learned how to play the game. I knew that there was a UFC in Sao Paulo. I just wanted to shoot my shot and see if it would work, but here we are. However, before I turn it to the panel, here's a recent post earlier today from the champion. He says, Charles, I asked to fight in the U.S. in the summer, but the UFC has other plans. I am a UFC fighter like you, never set the conditions for the UFC, and fought where they offered. My last fight took place in Australia at the Challenger's backyard. Simple. Everything you say makes no sense. Guys, did Oliveira have a leg to stand on here, as last year's fight was also in Abu Dhabi? Is this complaint fair or foul? Dan Tom.
I think it's fair. When I saw this, I was like, I had to go back and reread the quote, and I'm like, you didn't sound like you said anything too crazy there, like went in hard, first of all, and it is fair. And not that, Makhachev's response isn't true or isn't unfair in return. It's just more of just kind of tone deaf, I think, from Makhachev, where it's just like, it's like the privileged kid who was born on first base. Like, even if you're not being mean and like calling them out, they'll get like hyper defensive. Like, well, what are you talking about? I'm just making the most of the opportunity I have here. It's not my fault that I was born with the golden D, and being treated like so, which is exactly how Makhachev is being treated since Khabib departed. He now has the golden ticket, so to speak. And they've been absolutely catering to him. He's been doing his camps over there in Abu Dhabi and Bahrain as part of the reason why he hadn't been able to fight sometimes, with whether it was test issues, visa issues, or other. They still cater to him. That's a fact. I believe what Makhachev says, but it doesn't change the fact that the sky is blue. And Charles Oliveira, like many of the Brazilians, by the way, brave Brazilians, they're often called because they're the ones having to go travel. They're the ones being called in for the fights that nobody wants. They're the ones that either get the fights that nobody wants, or they have to wait forever like a Pantoja and pay their effing dues. You know where my heart's at. I support Charles Oliveira, an unsung king, an uncrowned king at the moment, but no gripes that are nothing wrong with what he's saying.
All right. Danny, your take?
Yeah, I think Charles Oliveira's comments are fair, but I think they are attributed or targeted at the wrong person. I don't think Islam Makhachev is calling his shots. I think this is more a UFC thing. I think the UFC obviously wants to have Islam defending in his belt in Abu Dhabi, since they have, a deal over there to have a certain amount of events. So they were just saving him for that date. I think if Islam would have been given the option to fight earlier, he would have. And, he fought Volkanovski in Australia. I don't think he has an issue going to Brazil and fighting Oliveira there. It's just, I think the UFC just wanted the biggest Muslim star or most elite fighter, in this case, the UFC lightweight champion, defend his belt in Abu Dhabi, which makes sense, right? If you just look at the card, Hamzat there, and a lot of those fighters are present on that event, and you can expect that moving forward. So yeah, I think Oliveira's point is legitimate, but I think it's directed at the wrong person. I think if anything, mention it to the UFC. I don't think this is much of a choice for Islam Makhachev.
All right. How about you guys?
I think they both actually make really good points. When you're the challenger, though, you can't really dictate where fights are going to be. I think you just have to be happy that you're getting that second try, right? Because that's a stacked division. It's so hard to get in those positions. Look at a guy like Aljamain Sterling, and he's begging for another shot, right? This guy's got it. I think it had to be said, and I'm happy that he said it. Like Danny said, I think it's probably more directed towards somebody else, but it's something that needs to be said. Now I think you just have to be realistic. You have to focus and get the W, and then maybe you'll have a little bit more power to dictate where fights should or shouldn't be done. And then going forward, man, I don't think you ever have to see Abu Dhabi again. We'll see, but I definitely think it's something that needed to be said.
Yeah. Both guys did have some good points. And so did you guys. All right. In the chat, Ben Kenobi, if this will settle you down, shout out to Benoit Saint-Denis. We're not ignoring him. I also think he's outstanding. In fact, if you look at the USA Today Sports and MMA Junkie rankings, he's in the rankings in the lightweight division. Simply go to the tab that has rankings, look at the drop downs, and you'll see we know who he is. He's a beast. He got some love in our rankings. So unlike Fight Matrix that has him outside the top 20, we actually have him in our rankings, which go 15 and then honorable mention. So hopefully with that, you can now. Cállate. All right. We got a few more here. We'll make them quick, guys. We got to be real fast. This is a speed round. Michael Bisping says the Diaz brothers are Hall of Famers without a shot of a doubt. That's his quote. Agree or nah, Danny?
Yeah, I agree. A lot of it is not really statistics. As we see some fighters, there's a lot based on impact, and you can't deny the impact that both these guys have had on the UFC. So, yes. Love it. Quick stuff. Goes.
I think every time we bring this topic up, Donald Cerrone kind of moves that cowboy hat down a little bit. But look, I think when you hear the names, you go, absolutely in. But really, when you look at the statistics, like you look at Nick Diaz, arguably his best win is probably Robbie Lawler. And that was early in his career. BJ Penn, different weight class, kind of moving out of mixed martial arts. If you really want to pick apart their records, maybe not, but I feel like they've done enough to get in.
All right, Dan Tom.
I'll say yes on impact, but I'll just add to Goz's note that even though I'm a Diaz brothers fan, it's funny because Nate arguably surpassed Nick, even though Nick has better accolades. Mm-hmm. But Nate, even though he surpassed him with impact, has easily a worse record and a really bad record just in general. Like it's actually just, it's not good. But yes, the answer is yes.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt that those guys are superstars. Did they take some L's along the way? Yes. But yeah, impact for sure. And I think I agree with Michael Bisping. With the day they officially hang it up and really, really no longer return, I think that year they go in. Maybe even both together. Who knows? All right, folks. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching the Spinning Back Clique live here. Next week will be 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. Then after that, we return to our regular start time of noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Please share this video and share it with your friends that love MMA. Hit that like and subscribe. And then that little bell, it'll tell you when we're on live because there's some great content on this channel. Right now, starting on a separate stream is the Dana White Contender Series weigh-ins. So check that out. We're out of here, though. Go out and be a champion. We'll see you next week.